So the question is, how does Greek put some extra umph on something, right? And if you assume that English does it in the same way, then you'll lose the umph. It won't transfer over.
Got it.
And so what ends up happening is basically there's a mismatch between languages in certain places. And if you don't recognize the mismatch, then here's what happens. You'll have somebody can translate something, right?
Yep.
And you're like, wait a minute, what is that? Like, what is that literally? And you go in and you see, wait a minute, I'm not. You know, people will make
this comparison because we have so many tools out there.
Yeah, people will make their judgment based on the amount of knowledge they have access to, right? So they'll go on. They may not know Greek, but they'll be like, yeah, do my word study, and that's not actually in the Greek, and da-da-da.
So it's not a valid translation.
And so the question is, no, that's not the issue. It is there. It's just putting diesel. It's pumping diesel through the engine, and you're just not seeing the way it pumps diesel.
Got it.
So Greek, a lot of times it's called ellipsis, right? And what it does, what it basically means is that it's a common function in Greek that if a direct object is clear from the context, then it will omit the direct object, right? But it's clear from the context what it is. So English doesn't do that. English can do it, but it doesn't like to do it. So an example would be Revelation 3. Revelation 3, Jesus is introducing himself as the one who opens and shuts doors, right? He says, if I open, no one can shut. If I shut, no one can open, right?
So
and it's
door's
obvious,
not actually even in the Greek.
The word door is not there.
Got it.
But he means doors, and it's clear from the context.
Yeah.
And so most, you go to the Net Bible, they have some good translators' notes, right? So you'll go and they'll say Greek often leaves direct objects out.
Got it.
When they're clear from the context. English doesn't usually do that, right?
This would be really awkward in our language.
If I just
lose it.
You would lose it, right? And so what's happening there is that the language is functioning according to its own rules, right? But if I start doing that fully, now there are some times you can do that, and there's, like I said, there are some times where it's not that big a deal because they're still engines, right? Yeah. And you don't have to work through all that kind of stuff.
They have common pieces.
They have common pieces. But in this situation, if somebody goes on and they'll say, well, let me check this out, and they go in their Bible software and they say, wait a minute, the word door is not in the Greek, right?
Yeah.
And then so they write an e-stone. I call it e-stoning people, right? Or usually it's fake.
They write an email and stoning a person.
Yeah, you're messing with the word of God.
I've never heard you say that.
An e-stone? Yeah. They start throwing e-stones or Facebook stones, right?
I've had many of those. That's great.
Facebook stones, you're just one click away from pelting somebody and
totally.
incurring the Lord's judgment, right?
Thinking that you have the upper hand on.
Yeah, totally.
That's interesting.
So what ends up happening is it's just no. That's the way Greek. That's the great way Greek does it, right?
And so in English, you're trying to kind of bring what the Greek has the certain functions and how it functions and how it brings the meaning and the umph across. In English, you have to do the same. You have to bring it over so that it has the same umph, but it's not going to be this exact translation across sometimes, because you'd become Yoda.
Right. That's what we're talking. Greek and English clothes. I have a friend of mine in Minneapolis that they're trying to get a revision. There's some believers that are trying to get them to revise the translation that was done, and they said it sounds like Yoda.
Yeah.
And what's happened there is that there's probably been some mismatches between Greek, maybe even English, and that language, right?
Yep.
There's another example I read recently where that in this particular language, right? If like you're reading Mark, right? He's connecting all of his sentences with kai, and
a bunch of ands, which means ands. Yeah.
And I don't, you know what? Let me back up. I'm not sure if that's the exact example it was, but basically the main point was that in that language, if you're gonna take what's happening in Greek and just say and bring that word exactly into that language, then it forces them to do a paragraph break. Because in that language, that signals a paragraph break.
Wow.
Versus in Mark, he's not signaling a paragraph break. He's connecting ideas. And so they ended up in their initial translation before, I think they consulted with some folks.
A million paragraph
It was like
breaks.
One chapter ended up being like 20 paragraphs because each sentence was a paragraph, right? And it's just like, no, guys, no, you're driving a diesel.
Yeah.
They're driving a car. They're not trying to, there's not some conspiracy where they're trying to corrupt the word of God. They're just trying to say, look, I want my car to go down the road that people actually recognize as my language.
That's
right?
Good. Where it actually impacts the reader.
Totally.
To get what's really there.
Totally. So a lot of times what ends up happening is there'll be a culture of suspicion developed. And what I mean by that is, so like you're reading the NASB, right? and they'll italicize words that they say these aren't in the Greek text, right?
Yep.
And so I understand their heart behind it, because they're wanting to honor the Word of God, just like their readers, right?
Absolutely.
And so the Lord, I mean, he sees that. But at the end of the day, it's actually creating a misunderstanding insofar as what it's doing and what it's actually signaling to you is where the mismatches in the language are. Often, maybe not always, but many times, it's actually signaling where the mismatches in the language actually are.
Got it.
So, like the direct object thing, right? You can italicize that, but what you're really saying through that is Greek omits direct objects.
Yeah,
that's what you're really saying.
Then you have to put in the text, oh, this isn't really in the Greek, and it's omitted.
This isn't really in the Greek, when actually, no, it's in the Greek, but Greek is letting the reader know about it within its own devices, right?
Got it.
And so by italicizing it, what's actually being said there is that Greek
functions different.
That Greek functions different. That it doesn't do direct objects, right?
Got it.
So what ends up happening there is now people are, and then that's where translators' notes are really important. So people can be let into the process. That's one of the reasons we're doing this. People can be let into the process, and it removes suspicion. Like, oh, like they actually have a reason for what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And man, it may be actually a good reason, right?
Yep.